And we need everything. We need doctors, we need lawyers, we need everything. Every kehillah has to have big supporters for all the yeshivas and so on. People shouldn't feel as if the one who's learning is doing something more important than them. We need everybody in Klal Yisrael. And whatever one can contribute to the shleimus ha'inyan of Klal Yisrael, Be'eni HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zechad Amar B'Vech Amavet, Shi'echav Li B'Lo Shamayim.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Stark Tank. Stark Tank is a podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. This week's episode is a recording of a shiur with Rav Hershel Schachter. We had the tremendous opportunity to gather in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, and hear from one of the Gedolei Ador about how to find meaning as a Ben Torah in the workforce. The shiur was hosted at the OU Israel headquarters in partnership with the OU Israel Business Professionals Network. Special thanks goes to Rav Yair Hinden, Rav Sam Shor, and Jeremy Lustman. Before we jump in, I want to let you know that we also have a newsletter where I share raw and unfiltered takes on Torah learning, work, family, yeshiva, and more. You can go to starktank.org or follow the link in the show notes and subscribe today. That's starktank.org or follow the link in the show notes.
We all learn in yeshivas. In the yeshivas, they exaggerate a little bit that you have to learn Gemara Be'iyun, you have to learn all the Reb Shimon Shkop and Reb Naftali Truk, and Reb Chaim Soloveitchik and Reb Baruch Ber. And if you don't learn with all of the Achrayim and all of the Gedolei HaRoshei Yeshiva, it's considered as if you didn't learn. So there's a problem if people go to work, and then they feel that whatever they're going to do, the little learning they're going to do is not considered learning. I was given to understand that it's a bigger problem here in Eretz Yisrael than in America. Apparently here in Eretz Yisrael, they exaggerate more than in America. In America, they understand a little better. The Maisa, if you learn Mishnayos with Bartanur, is a gewaltige thing. If you learn Chumash, you learn Tanach. We didn't learn Tanach when we were in the yeshivas. We didn't learn Tanach at all. Many years ago, I think 2 or 3 years after Hakamas HaMedina, the Aguda with the Mizrahi in Cleveland decided they're going to make a joint observance of Yom HaAtzmaut. So they put out advertisements in the newspaper that they had Mrs. Gifter, she's still alive now, in the full senses. So she signed to invite all the women. What's the name of the Rosh Yeshiva? The Rosh Yeshiva tells the Yeshiva who founded the Yeshiva. Rav Elya Meir Bloch. Rav Elya Meir Bloch signed the invitation to invite the men and women should come. So I live in Washington Heights. After I got married, I moved to Washington Heights, lead the yeshiva. I teach in the yeshiva. So one of the members from Breuer sent a letter to Rav Elya Meir Bloch. How can the Aguda invite people to come to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut? We don't believe in the Medina. That's the question that he asked him. So I would throw the letter in the garbage. Rav Elya Meir Bloch didn't throw in the garbage. He sent him a long letter. The letter was later printed in Hebrew. The letter was originally Hebrew. And then they translated it into English, and they wrote the whole background of the whole issue. So Rav Elya Meir Bloch wrote that there were 3 things before the war that the Orthodox Jews ran away from because they were taken over by the Maskilim, by the Apikursim. The one is Zionism, because the secular Zionists wanted to establish a Medina to take the place of the religion. We won't need the religion anymore. That's what they said. I'm not psychoanalyzing them. That's what they said. They want to establish a Medina so they won't have to have the religion anymore. So the Orthodox Jews ran away from Zionism. It's all Apikursis. Then the Tanach, the Apikursim, the Maskilim were learning Tanach, were giving new interpretations, not according to the traditional interpretation. So they ran away from Lori Melim and Tanach. And then they were trying to revive speaking B'Lashon HaKodesh. So they made up a whole bunch of new words. Electricity is Chashmal, and a whole bunch of other words. So the religious Jews didn't like these. We're all secular Jews, anti-religious Jews. They ran away from speaking Lashon HaKodesh. So they said Yiddish is the Lashon HaKodesh. Hebrew is not the Lashon HaKodesh. The modern Hebrew is not Lashon HaKodesh. Every language changes over the years. In Shulchan Aruch, you have Hilchas Nedorim. The middle part of Nedorim is based on the assumption that Nedorim haloch Hashem Adam. What's included in Neder, what's not included, all depends what the usage of the word is in that language. So the Mishnahs have a lot of detailed dinim, around 2-3 prokim in the middle of the Nedorim. So the Mishnah tells you if he said such a thing, what's included, what's not included. So the Meiri writes, and the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch quote all the dinim. So the Meiri writes, and every Gemara he repeats it many times over and over and over again. It's bosa mokam or bosa zman. In the days of the Tanaim, that's what was meant by that language. Today we speak Hebrew differently. And before the war, we spoke Hebrew differently. Every language develops over the years. The days of the Tanaim, that's what it meant. So the religious Jews ran away for these three. So that's what the Rav Elya Meir Bloch writes in his letter. All three, Zionism is a significant part of the Jewish religion. We shouldn't run away from it. We should observe Zionism like all the other 613 mitzvahs. It has its makom chashuv in the Torah. The Daber B'Lashon HaKodesh, he quotes the Rambam and the Pirush HaMishnayos. And Pirkei Avos writes, "Habizor b'mitzvah kala kavach amura." What's a mitzvah kala? So he says, the mitzvah kala, the Daber B'Lashon HaKodesh. Limud Tanach is certainly Talmud Torah. You have to learn Tanach. We neglected it in the yeshivas. People think that you learn Tanach is a bittul Torah. What is bittul Torah? That's the Torah Shebechsav. We live. Seder Olam has a comment in the Diyim Achronim. Chagaz Charmalachi Botl Nevuah MeYisrael Mekam B'Yelach Hatoz Zechoshmat Divrei Chacham. Means that we live in the Tkufa of the Torah Shebal Pen. So instead of placing the emphasis on Pshuto Shamikra, which many schools do place today, I think my impression is from the Seder Olam that we should emphasize the limit of Torah of Tanach according to the traditions of the Torah Shebal Pen. There are many traditions. What's meant by this parsha in Tanach? So if you put together all the traditions, you have a whole addition to the Pshuto Shamikra is emes. But the drushes of the Torah Shebal Peh are also emes. So we should learn Tanakh according to the traditions of the Torah Shebal Peh. It's interesting, many years ago, there was a woman whose husband was a rabbi. I forgot her name. I think she taught in a mamlachti dati in a government school. And a required reading for that class, I think it was a high school, required reading was Rabbi Soloveitchik's drusha that he gave on Yom Ha'atzmaut, around 8 years after Hakamas HaMedina, I think. Kol Dodi Dofik. I remember he was saying, Kol Dodi Dofik. He was hacking on the stender, he was standing, he was tweaking. That said, the sixth, the Baruch Shalom was knocking on the door, wants us all to come back to it. It was a very moving presentation when you read it. Kol Dodi Dofik is very moving when you read it. So that was a required reading in school. The students, the teacher, her husband was a Rav. How come if Rabbi Soloveitchik holds so much from there, how come he hasn't come since 1935 when he was a candidate to the Rabbanos in Tel Aviv and he lost out to Rav Amil? Rav Amil was known in Europe as a Mizrahi leader and Rav Soloveitchik was known as a member of the Aguda. So he lost, they say at that time, his uncle, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik's uncle, Rav Soloveitchik's great-great-great-uncle, was a Meir Bar Ilan. He was the son of the Nitziv. And Rav Chaim Soloveitchik married the granddaughter of the Nitziv. So Rav Meir Bar Ilan said, over my dead body, he won't let any Rabbanim from the Aguda get big positions in Eretz. So he blocked it, that Rav Soloveitchik should become the rabbi in Tel Aviv. So since then, he never visited Eretz, never even visited Eretz. He's busy learning all the time. So she sent him a letter. She excuses herself. She feels that it's not right on her part. She's only an elementary school teacher, a high school teacher, whatever. And he's a big Rosh Yeshiva in New York, and a big yeshiva. She has no right to question him, but she said the question was bothering all of the students. So he writes, he planned to go visit Eretz Yisrael, and his wife just passed away, and he's still mourning the death of his wife. And there's a medrash that says that outside of Yerushalayim, there was a room where the businessmen make a calculation every day to see if they made money today, they lost money. So the room had to be outside of Yerushalayim because you have to be b'simcha when you're in Yerushalayim. So if you're going to make the cheshbon in Yerushalayim, you may see that you lost money today, so you're going to be sad. So he says now he's very sad over the death of his wife, and he can't come to visit Yerushalayim because you have to be happy there. And then he says, and about what you apologized, that you have no right to question me. So he quotes the expression from the Gemara in the end of the second parak in Brachas. The Gemara says, the Chachamim used to have an expression in the yeshiva, Ani bria v'chaveri bria. The world, you need farmers, and you need doctors, you need pharmacists, and you need engineers, and you need biologists, you need all kinds of people. You need everybody. And everybody has his job. One they think, well, I'm saying big shiur to the older students on a higher level. No one's on a higher level. That's in the Zmiris that we sing on Shabbos. That's Hashem Shabbos Abenim Abbas V'kel Yirotze Kimincha Al Machvaz. That's the theme of that piyut. That the little children don't really know Hilchos Shabbos. They're probably all Machal Shabbos in the course of the day. But just like Mincha, it says Nechayach Hashem. A korban behema costs $1,000. A korban behema, Mincha costs $5 for a sack of flour. How expensive is it? It says Reach Nechayach Ishel Hashem. Everybody chips in. Klal Yisrael needs all of these people. We need people in the army. We need everybody. So he says you shouldn't feel bad. So it's interesting. The letter wasn't made public till after Rabbi Soloveitchik passed away, till after his wife passed away. But then Talmid Chacham publicized the letter in Israeli newspapers. Then it became public. It's interesting. The Maisa we need people in all the fields. And the Rambam is the one who complains based on the Mishnah. You're not allowed to make the Torah kardam lachba boy. Rabbanim are not allowed to get paid a salary. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I think in Parshas V'eschanan, so the Pashup Pshat is, I taught you over all the dinim. Moshe Rabbeinu gives a long series of drushes a month before he dies on Zion Order. And he starts on Rosh Chodesh Shvat for a month and a week. He's reviewing all of Torah Shabbat Peh, giving over the whole Masar of Torah Shabbat Peh to Bnei Yisrael. So the Pashup Pshat is, I transmitted all the dinim, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed me to transmit all the dinim. So the Gemara has an additional level of distortion. I transmitted the dinim without charging you tuition, just like my Nabbas and Hasina, the Rebbe didn't charge me tuition. So too, when I teach the Torah, you're not allowed to charge tuition. I remember years ago, Cardinal Lustiger, who was born a Jew, and his parents were not observant, so they gave him over to Catholics when the Nazis were killing all the Jews. They came over to Catholics that he should survive. So I think his parents were killed in the camps, and he survived. And then they baptized him, and then he became a cardinal. He was the cardinal of Paris, Lustiger, and in French they called Lustiger. So one day he walked in before 9/11. So Yeshiva University is open. Anyone could walk in and sit on any classes. They walked in and he was walking around, and he saw all the classrooms have windows he can look in. He looked in the window and he saw, in the morning, he saw the rabbis are giving shiur in Torah, Shulchan Aruch or Gemara or whatever, Tanach, whatever they were teaching in the different classes. And he saw on the blackboard there were equations for chemistry, physics, biology, math. So he understood the same students. So learn Torah in the morning, study secular education in the afternoon. And by them in Europe, they don't have such a thing. Whoever goes to university doesn't go to theological seminary. So he was wondering how come there's a difference. So he thought the terrace must be because we have the Harusa system. So he went into Dr. Lamb's office. Dr. Lamb gave his life for the yeshiva. I wasn't that close to him while he was alive, but he gave his life for the yeshiva. He was always traveling Arba Kampasor to schnorr money for the yeshiva. So he was hardly ever in his office. So B'mikra Punk that day, that Lustiger was walking around. Dr. Lamb was there. So he comes and he speaks to the secretary. He'd like to speak to Dr. Lamb. She says, go right ahead. He's there. He was free. He was in the yeshiva. It was a chiddush. He was hardly ever in the yeshiva. And then he had time to speak to people. So he asked, he'd like to bring a group of cardinals from Europe. They didn't speak any English. They only spoke French. The rabbis in the yeshiva didn't speak French, so we had to have a translator. So they came a few times. The first time they came was interesting. First time they came that first year, they said that for 40, 50 years, for many years, they would come to America and they would only meet with the Reform and the Conservative. And after all those years, they came to the realization that the Reform and the Conservative don't represent the Jewish religion. They realized that you have to meet with the Orthodox to know what Judaism is all about. So the first year they came to America, so they came to YU, they went to Torah B'das, Nechaim Berlin, and Yankev Yes, they went to Satmar, Labab, they went all over. But apparently YU gave them a better lunch than the others. So the next year, from that time on, they only came to YU. They didn't come to the others. After Lustiger passed away, he used to be the Cardinal of Paris. But the Cardinal of Paris, Yarshin Deschus, to be the Rosh HaMedabrim, they would always call up on the telephone after every year and a half or so. They came 5, 6, 7, 8 times, I'm not sure. Every year and a half or so, they would come to the yeshiva. They knew Rabbi Soloveitchik wrote guidelines, what we're allowed to carry on conversation with the Catholics, what not. only allowed to talk about social issues, not about theological issues. So every year, whoever would be the speaker said, do we know the guidelines? They would say, I don't want to violate the guidelines, but they wanted to whatever. Every time they had a different angle why we should join together to try to have hashpah on the public. So the first time they came, he wanted to learn what the Harusa system is all about. He wanted to introduce it in the theological system. He thought that would solve the problem. It had nothing to do. It didn't solve the problem at all, nothing to do with anything. Remember, one of the sessions, they had, after Lucia passed away, they had, I think it's the Pope retired or the Pope passed away, I forgot about it, all the details. There was going to be an election to choose a new Pope. So one of the candidates who thought that he stood a good chance of being a Pope, so when he came to speak to Dr. Lamb and all the rabbeim, a whole bunch of rabbeim were there, so he sat right opposite Dr. Lamb, and he said, tell me how you run the school. And he had a pad of paper, he was taking notes. So he was telling how we run the school. He wants to know how to be successful, to run their theological seminary the same way we're successful, he wants to know. So first thing that occurs to Lamb is he says, well, we're not allowed to charge any tuition because when Moses was on Mount Sinai, God didn't charge him tuition, so we don't charge any tuition. So he says, how do you pay the salary to the rabbeim? So he said, we have to have Malava Malkus to raise money. They never heard of that you have to have a fundraising function. They're loaded with money. They have enough of it. It was interesting, but that was the first thing that came to mind. The Rambam is not happy about the fact that so many Rabbanim in other countries would take a salary. That's kardam lachbaba. You're not allowed to take money for teaching Torah. The Chassam Sofer has a tshuva. One of his Talmidim asked him, is it permissible to take a Rabbanus and get a salary? Some Sofer says, what kind of a silly question? You're asking me. You don't know. I take a salary. I'm the rabbi in Pressburg. Of course it's permissible. He explains why. It's charbatola. It's not that you don't get that you teach for nothing, but they pay you not to take another job because you have to feed your family. They pay you not to work, then you're teaching for nothing. It has to be charbatola. So the Rambam feels that it's a big chil Hashem. He has it in the Mishnah Torah, in the Pirush HaMishnayos, and Pirkei. It's not right to take money. But over the generations, we've been making. Look, at Kehillah, we need everybody in the Kehillah. We need engineers, and we need scientists, and we need generals in the army, and we need people to figure out how to solve medical problems. So we need everything in Klal Yisrael. The chiyuv Talmud Torah is on everyone, to the extent that one has the ability to learn, they should learn. But everybody together constitutes ani bria, the chaveri bria. Everybody, you can't function without having everybody. Everyone has to learn to the best of their ability. That is considered a chiddush. If you learn Tanach, it's considered Talmud as a bit of a joke. People are not sure whether learning Tanach. Of course, it's Talmud Torah. We live in the tkufa of Torah Shabbat, so we're supposed to learn the Torah Shabbat according to all the traditions of the Torah Shabbat. But there's nothing wrong with it. Remember, Rav Soloveitchik said when he went to university in Berlin, there was one professor. He mentioned him by name. He was from Rabbi Hirsch's Kehillah. And he said everybody knew Tisha B'Av, he came into the university with his slippers. Everybody knew. Comes with the slippers on Tisha B'Av. He said he was a Yodea Sefer, but he wasn't a Talmid Chacham. He said in America, we have people who learn in yeshivas and they become doctors and engineers. Big Talmid Chachamim. Just yesterday, I was learning in the beis medrash by the NCSY program. I come many years. I come almost 30 years to learn with the high school students. It's very moving. So yesterday, a young man comes in. He was in the army just recently. And he says, when he was in the army, he came up with different shilas and halacha. So he put out a little soft cover pamphlet. Unbelievable. This guy was in the army. He should be a rosh yeshiva somewhere. There are many people like that. I don't think David HaMelech had people like that in his army. Such Talmidei Chacham. That's how they quote the Shachs and the Ksois and the Nesivas. And that's what Rav Soloveitchik said. It's not like in Rabbi Hirsch's community, had Balabatim who were Yodea Sefer. They knew how to look up a little bit and say, but we have not only Yodea Sefer, you have big Talmidei Chachamim who are doctors and lawyers. They give a weekly shiur in their community. If they're not able to give it, they attend the weekly shiur. The weekly shiur doesn't have to be to answer Rabbi Kevega's kasha. So he says, Hashem Yoreina, you have to answer. Baruch Shalom is going to answer the kasha. You don't have to give a shiur. Give a shiur. Something easy. It doesn't have to be the most complicated thing. There used to be a minhag that the chassan says Torah by the chassan's dish. Now they did away with it. I don't know why. I always encourage my boys. So that you said it's part of the mitzvah of Simchas Chasam Ekala. Rambam says that Simcha Yonta, if you just eat and drink and you be merry, that's called Simchas HaKeres. The way to really do Simcha is L'samech Ha'um Lolim. Be M'samech the Aniyim to make an appeal on Yonta for tzedakah. That's why you make an appeal. When you say Yiska, the Iker is, it's not that it's a moment of Avelis. There's no Avelis on Yontif. It's based on Simcha. Simchas Yontif is they make an appeal for the Aniyim, not for the hospitals and not for yeshiva. That's some other time. Yontif, you have to make an appeal for Aniyim, Bolim. And since we're giving tzedakah, so our parents were the ones who trained us, so this should be, our giving tzedakah should be farvechant as a schus for the niftar. But you have now, Balabatim, Muradik Balabatim. They know how to learn very well. They go to a shiur kavu every week. That's the way it should be. They give shiur. I speak about this every year in the yeshiva when the boys graduate. So they always have me speak to a group of the boys. They're going into the secular world, into the secular fields. They should learn as much as they can. They should try to give shiurim as much as they can in their communities. The rabbi will not be jealous. The rabbi will be very happy if someone else takes over the responsibility of giving a shiur or two a week. Why not? And Klal Yisrael needs all of this. I lived right down the block after I got married. I'm not a Yekin. I lived right down the block from Broyes. So I was there for many years. I'm married already 60 years. I moved into the neighborhood. So in Broyes, it's Yadua. There were two Balabatim who were the big Tomchim of Rabbi Breuer, Rabbi Schwab. There was Max Rosenberg and Harry Levy, the two frum Balabatim. Harry Levy had an apartment right near the Kosel Maravi. He would come sometimes there to so. And whenever the yeshiva didn't have money to pay the salary, you had two big balabatim who supported him. Every kehillah needs that. Every kehillah, you have to have a mikveh and a yeshiva and kashrus. You need everything all together. Now you have the OU, you have the government takes care of the mikveh, okay? But every kehillah has to have big supporters for all the yeshivas and so on. And we need everything. We need doctors, we need lawyers, we need everything. People shouldn't feel as if the one who's learning is doing something more important than them. We need everybody in Klal Yisrael. And whatever one can contribute to the shleimus ha'inyan of Klal Yisrael, Be'eni HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zechad Amar B'vech Amavet, Shichad V'li B'la Shamayim. I think that's what they wanted me to talk about. I'm not sure. Originally, I asked, what should I talk about? So they told me to talk about kashrus. I said, what about kashrus? So the kibbutz on the back said, I should talk about turkey and milk. I said, no, because I don't eat turkey and I don't drink milk. You wouldn't want to hear why. No, this is more important.
All the time that people spend at work, the Shulchan Aruch Shabbos indicate that in itself is a mitzvah, because you're allowed to travel before Shabbos if it's for business, for work purposes. So should we think of all these hours of work as time that we are seeking a mitzvah? There are other sugyas where work itself is not considered a mitzvah to be docha other things. How should we think about
it? Yeah, the mitzvah to support your family, mitzvah to not to live off of charity. Sure, it's a mitzvah.
Rabbi, of course, the ideal is to find some time of learning the amkis at work or at free time. Is there either a seder or a sefer or a tzura? If a person has an hour a week to learn something more, how should she do it? Should she learn Shulchan Aruch and Beis Yosef? Should she learn a sefer Achronim? Should she learn Mishnah? If yes, Mishnah, that's the Torah.
There's a famous line for Rabbi Sol Salanta. They asked him, if you only have an hour to learn, what should we learn? Because he used to hack, you should learn Musa. So he said, you learn Musa and you'll find out that you have more than an hour to learn. That was his famous line. But if you only have an hour, I would recommend people should go through the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Years ago, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was the bestseller. I think it sold more copies than the Chumash, than the Tanach, I think. It was published in many different countries. People don't know the ABC. You should go through the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, 2 minutes a day. Shomim Mitzvah, most of the dinim you know already. So every day, when you spend 2 minutes on the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, you'll probably you may or may not come across a din that you never heard before. So if you come across such a din, you underline it or you put a check on that sif. And then next year, when you review it, you can skip everything, just go what you checked off. So if you go through the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch 3 years in a row, then you graduated already. So then maybe work on the Chayei Adam, I wouldn't recommend to start with the Mishnah Berurah at all. Mishnah Berurah is very hard, very complicated. He was always machmer and everything. And that's not the Psak HaMekubal. That was not the way they did. They say in the name of Rabbi Henkel, I think, that the Mishnah Berurah is for Bnei Yeshiva, to be machmer. And the Rav Hershel Schachter is for Balabatim, normal. The Rav Hershel Schachter always defends the minig in Lithuania. Mishnah Berurah, it totally ignores the minig. people who learned in Europe say in Radin they didn't follow the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah was written it was a family project, written by different members of the family. It's interesting. There's a 3-volume set, many of you have it, the Kol Kisvei HaChavetz Chaim. So one of the sections there is not written by the Chavetz Chaim. It's a biography of the Chavetz Chaim written by one of his sons. So he writes that the Mishnah Berurah was a family project. They learned everything together. But then the Chavetz Chaim is signed. So he said, I wrote this section, my uncle wrote the other section, and that's why there's a stira. I paskin like Rashi, and my uncle paskin like this, and the father left it like that, this stira. There are many stiras, many stiras. So somehow the only place where they knew about this was the yeshiva Chavetz Chaim in New York, because Rab David Leibowitz, who found the Chavetz Chaim, was a nephew of the Chavetz Chaim, and he told the students, they always knew this all the years, that he wrote the section on Hilchas Daled Minim. Rab David Leibowitz.
You wrote the section?
Yeah, and it's a totally different style. The section on Daled Minim, on Hilchas Sukkah, is like a Minchas Chinuch. There are pilpulim there that are not even Legei La'alacha, just pilpulim. Totally different from the other stuff. And the first section, totally different. There's stiras between Aleph and Beis, a lot of stiras. It's interesting, Lubavitch used to, after communism collapsed in the late 90s, under the communists, they confiscated many Sfarim from the Lubavitcher libraries in different cities in Russia. So after communism collapsed, so the people from the Lubavitcher office kept on sending letters to the new Russian government. Could they please consider giving them back the Sfarim that were taken from their libraries? So they never got a response. After a few years, 7, 8 years, they received a whole carton full of Sfarim from different, they're still missing Sfarim, but they got back a lot of Sfarim. And then by mistake, the Russian government sent them the handwritten copy of the Mishnah Berurah that was sent to the typesetter to print. It doesn't belong to Lubavitch. It should go to the Chavetz Chaim's grandchildren. It has grandchildren in Arizona, in America. But they have it in 770. So the people who saw it told me it's written in different handwritings, a different color ink, and they know whose handwriting is whose, and they know which is the Chavetz Chaim's handwriting. So every 10 pages or so, the Chavetz Chaim would add a line or two at the end of a Bir Halacha to make a hachra. But the rest of the Sefer was not written by the Chavetz Chaim. That's why there are stiras all over the place. Look, we need everything. We need everything. I wouldn't recommend starting Mishnah Berurah. If you don't know the Gemaras, you will misunderstand the Mishnah Berurah. And Mishnah Berurah is always machmer. That's not the normal way to go.
Does Rabbi have a particular favorite interpretation of the term derech eretz today?
You have a term derech eretz. Make a parnasa, yeah. Got to make a parnasa. I live down the block from Breuer's. So that's their emblem. Halmatarim derech eretz. We should have derech eretz also.
Rabbi, for those who have made Aliyah and are now living in Eretz Yisrael, does that change the way they think about their business and their career part of their Yiddishkeit versus doing in Chutz?
Why should it change?
They're working in an Israeli economy, and the Chasam Sofer talks about
idealism of doing the Parasite Yisrael, that it's a Kili Yeshiva, it's all kinds of the mitzvah andere Zach.
Whatever you do in Eretz is a mitzvah, good. Yeshiva Eretz is a mitzvah, absolutely. No one debates that point.
There are some people who are in business for whom working more hours and more time will potentially make them more money.
I don't hear one.
Who don't necessarily work 9 to 5 kind of set hours, and for them who are in business who working more hours potentially will make more of a parnasa. Is there some sort of insight to the balance of like when you should say, okay, must speak, enough is enough, like now, you should, the balance between learning and working when it's not so clear cut.
The din is that Vilna Gaon writes in his commentary that Deris Aliyah is written by the Talmidim of the Gra. Deris Aliyah, the beginning of Peah, Eladam Shein Lam Shir, Talmud Torah Zayin Lo Shir. So he says the chiyuv is to learn Torah when you have free time. But how much is free time? So if you want to make $1 million a year, so you're not going to have so much free time. You don't need $1 million to live in the course of the year. So, the Mishnah has, the Mishnah in Moed Katan, third parak, says, if a person went to Chutz La'aretz and he came back by boat and it took forever, and there's no barber on the boat, and he came back on Chol Hamoed and he didn't have the haircut, He had no ability. The boat took weeks and weeks till they got back to Eretz Yisrael. So he has a heter. He was honest. He couldn't take a haircut before then. And he's allowed to take a haircut on Chalamoid. So the Gemara said, why was he honest? Who gave him permission to go to Chutz La'aretz? So the Gemara says that if a person doesn't make he doesn't parnasa, and he goes to Chutz La'aretz to make parnasa, that's permissible. He's allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. And if he makes a fortune and he goes to the Chutz La'aretz to make twice a fortune, he had no right to go to Chutz La'aretz. So it's not, he had no right to be honest. He has no head to take a haircut. And when is there a machlokes hatanoim? He makes ends meet, but he doesn't have enough money to buy candy for the children, to buy ice cream, to lead a little bit of a life a little easier, to be easier to buy ice cream, to buy cookies, whatever. He wants to make a little more b'har b'chon. So that's a machlokes we pass, and that's also called, you're permitted to leave to Chutz La'aretz for that also. So the Pasha said the same thing. Let's say if a person, some people, they just can't learn. It's not for them. They can't learn. They can't learn? Okay, so let them work all the time. But other people, if they'll have free time, they will be able to learn. So once they make enough that they're living a decent life, they don't have to fast every Sheni b'Chamishi, and they have enough money to buy toys for the children and candies and everything. So then they really should not work full time. They should only work, if by working half a day, they'll make enough parnasa, then they should only work a half a day and learn the other half of the day.
Is there a value for a rabbi to be rich? And if so, to what extent?
I didn't hear what?
A value in rabbanim to being rich, to be wealthy, beyond.
To be wealthy? Yeah, the Gemara says, when you appoint a Kohen Gadol, HaKohen HaGadol may gadleihem mishalachov, that you have to, when whomever they choose to be the Kohen Gadol, has to be, you have to make him wealthy in order that everyone will respect him. So the Rambam writes, I was very surprised. The Rambam writes, it has to be wealthier than the wealthiest Kohen. I don't know where he got that from. I thought they have to make him wealthy that everyone should respect him. So Rashi says on the Gemara, this is quoted, the Rashi is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. The same thing by Rabbanim, who are heads of yeshivas. You have to enrich them so that the Tzibur will respect them. The Gemara tells a story in Tainus, I think, that Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa were learning Becharusa in the yeshiva, and they decided they'll be poor forever. So they're going to leave the yeshiva and they're going to make a parnasa. They're going to travel around the world and make money. So they were walking to the big city to get a job. And then they took a break from walking and they sat down under a bridge to eat lunch. So Rabbi Yochanan hears the angels have a conversation. These two people left the yeshiva. They deserve the death penalty. We're going to kill them because they left the yeshiva. They belong in the yeshiva. So Rabbi Yochanan said, did you hear that? So Ilfa said, hear what? He didn't hear anything. So he said, oh, nothing. So he understood that it's a message, min hashamayim. So he said, I changed my mind. I'm going back to the yeshiva. Ilfa said, I'm not going back to the yeshiva. So Ilfa traveled around the world and he became a wealthy man. And then when he came back to the yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva had passed away. They appointed Rabbi Yochanan as the Rosh Yeshiva. And he realized if he would have been in the yeshiva, they would have appointed him because he was stronger in learning than Rabbi Yochanan. Why would he become wealthy? Because the Rashi quotes that the Gemara, in order to command respect, you have to see to it that Kohen Gadol should be a wealthy man. So the same thing, Rabbanim, the Balabatim have an obligation to see to it that the Rabbanim should not be poor men. They should be wealthy men. The Rabbanim should not bring this up. The Rabbanim should know that they're not allowed to charge for their services. But the Balabatim should know their Maim B'Chazal. They should know Galei Mishalachim. Instruction.
Somebody who has someone who's a working person, Balabatim, or in other ways, it has to switch the Torah to the tzibur, but also sometimes that conflicts with teaching and learning with their own children. How much of a balance should that matter in terms of taking away from the tzibur or giving?
There's a big problem. Many of the European Rabbanim who came to America years ago, they were so busy with the Balabatim, they neglected their own children. So their own children grew up. They're not Shomer Shabbos. That's terrible. It's ridiculous. The main influence you can have on the Balabatim is if they see that the rabbi has a beautiful family, all the children are normal, they get married normally, they have a parnasa, they raise their grandchildren and so on. That's the biggest hashpah you can have. The Mela. Klal Yisrael, Avram Avinu, Avram Yitzchak, in the beginning of Yaakov's life, they were proactively involved in proselytizing. It says, "Vayeshev Yaakov beretz Miguri el beretz Canaan." So the medrash understand Miguri, Loshen, Gerus. That Rav Yitzchak and Yaakov, all three of them were Megayer. They were proactively Megayer. And then after all the Shvatim were born, so then the Meshech Chochmah explained based on the Psukim, Hashem said, from now on, you don't have to proselytize, become B'yasei. Just B'nai Yisrael be or la goyim. The goyim will see that we have beautiful families and we have work ethic and we have integrity and honesty and so on. So we'll have an influence on the Ummah Soilam by that. We haven't been so successful in that. We have here in Eretz Yisrael, we had a chief rabbi who sat in prison. Then we had a roshei memshala. I think, remember I was once in the office of the president here in Yerushalayim. So they have in his garden outside, they have a bust of all of the heads of the roshei memshala. So the one who was, I think, in prison, if I'm not mistaken, his bust is all ruined by the sun. All the others are normal, and his was ruined with the sun. It's like embarrassed. It's an embarrassment. And Chavri Knesset are always being investigated because of the good Meisim Tov. And Meir Shorim, a lot of times when they're angry at the government, so they throw the garbage in the street. We haven't succeeded in serving as an Or LaGoyim. We're supposed to have a clean Medina and everything is honest and above board and everybody does L'Shem Shemayim. We don't do it. So we're not doing our job properly. We're supposed to serve as an Or LaGoyim to show them how to be successful. So the rabbi's main success is if he has children who are normal and they marry nice shidduch, have nice grandchildren. It's all about batim will see. So they'll have an influence. But the rabbanim, for a lot of the early rabbanim, the children were not shomim mitzvah at all. They neglected their own children. That's a big mistake. Exactly how you figure out the balance is a major issue. But you can't give up on your own children. The hashpah has to begin with one's own children. I would think so.
Take one last question for this shoot. We've been talking about coming to Kollel for 30 years. Why do you like teaching the younger generation? What is it about the teenagers that come to Kollel? Why versus a room like this?
Why not? High school boys who want to learn a half a day, come officially to learn a little bit and to have sports and to have touring, to go on tiyulim. So some of them learn a whole day and some of them go sports a whole day. But most of them do half and half. It's beautiful. I think this is the future of Klal Yisrael. They asked me to give a shiur on Friday to the alumni from the NCSY group. So it's quite an impressive group. A lot of these people they live in Eretz Yisrael now. They're in chinuch here. A lot of them are in chinuch in America. They started off in NCSY. And they picked up a lot in learning. The NCSY, it's a different kind of a program from what it used to be. It used to be 1/3 of the children were public school and 2/3 were yeshiva. And they would learn together to try to influence the students in the public schools to remain observant, to be a little more observant, and possibly to go to yeshiva if they can. But that ended a long time ago because the media in America presented as if Eretz Yisrael is a war zone. So the non-observant parents are afraid to send their children to a war zone. They're killing as if they're shooting people right and left. No war zone here. The economy is fantastic and it's peaceful. The rest of the country is peaceful. So now all the children come from observant homes, but a lot of them are not so into learning. So this gives them excitement. They get excited about learning. They meet different rabbanim. Every week they have different people speaking. Last week they had Rabbi Ramon. He's gewaldig. He spoke. He's gewaldig. Then they had the head of the IDF Rabbanut of the army, Schwartz. They passed on all the shilas. He had chief rabbi that doesn't have too many shilas. Went to observe the Yom Ha'atzmaut. Okay. But he passed on all the shilas. How do you identify the Mason? All the real serious shilas from the army. You have all the shilas. So he spoke to the madrichim. He didn't speak to all the younger high school students. He spoke to the madrichim. It's a very beautiful system. I'm very impressed. Every year it gets better and better. I feel privileged to have a share in the program.